So you want to play support in Guild Wars 2. Muckluck Douglas Bartholomew Reginald Esquire IV here, and here's what you need to know. First of all, supports in Guild Wars 2 are different from most traditional MMOs due to its past. To TLDR it, at launch, Guild Wars 2 shunned the holy trinity of healer, tank, and DPS. But years later, with the addition of many new builds and tougher fights in its numerous expansions, there are many builds that now act as healers, and in some situations, they sometimes tank fights at the same time. These defensive supports have gained a reputation as being the healer for the group, and also bringing most, but not all, of the boons, also known as buffs, to the party, drastically increasing the group's performance. Their counterparts, the offensive supports, typically bring the remaining buffs that the healer could not, and then supply as much DPS as they can as a second priority. Let's talk group compositions. Guild Wars 2 PvE can largely be broken up into three groups. Large-scale content, such as Open World, Dragonstorm, and Convergences, which can be any number of people from a few all the way up to a 50-man squad. 5-man content, which includes dungeons, dragon response missions, and the most popular, fractals. And 10-man content, which includes strike missions and raids. In all forms of organized content, groups are set up based on groups of 5. So 5-man content, you would have all buffs and debuffs necessary. In 10-man content, each of the two 5-man groups will have all of their buffs covered, and in large-scale content like an organized world boss such as Dragon's End, you would again set everyone up in groups of 5. The standard setup in each group is 1 defensive support, 1 offensive support, and 3 dime a dozen DPS. You can find those lying around anywhere. For these group compositions, whether you play an offensive or a defensive support, the important part is to find a counterpart that matches with you. Think like two puzzle pieces that fit together. If you are both doing the same role, the group might work, but it will be awkward and cumbersome, like running with 2 left shoes. Now, the matchups vary from patch to patch, so rather than just list them all off and potentially have the list go out of date and be inaccurate in the near future, I'll instead explain why they match up so that you can understand the reason. We're going to talk about boons now, so if you aren't familiar with those, I'll link a video that covers them down below. You can watch that at your convenience. There is currently no class in the game that can provide quickness and alacrity boons at the same time to their entire party. This is the primary reason groups have 2 supports. You will have a defensive support that provides either alacrity or quickness. Then in addition to that, they may also provide regeneration, protection, up to 25 stacks of might, fury, swiftness, and possibly vigor. Some supports, like Druid at the time of this recording, can provide alacrity as well as all of those other listed boons. So in that case, the Druid would then want to find an offensive support that provides quickness to cover the remaining one. Opposite of that example, a Firebrand support provides most of those boons and quickness, so they would pair up with an offensive support that provides alacrity. The next factor is stability and Aegis. These are not required but are extremely helpful. These boons are not expected to be kept up 24/7 like others are. These are use when you need them type boons. So in an experienced group, if the defensive support cannot provide stability, for example, on demand, they would try to find an offensive support that can. A current example of this is Heal Scourge, which provides alacrity and many other boons and is very capable, but does not have a reliable way of giving its group stability in an instant. They might pair up with a Quickness Herald, which can provide the quickness, of course, but can also bring that stability on demand. So, TLDR for this section, if you play an offensive or a defensive support, do you provide quickness or alacrity? Okay, now look up what classes provide the other one, and if your class can't provide stability or Aegis in a pinch, figure out which of those classes can, and you will know who you pair well with for most content. Let's talk general priorities. There isn't a set rotation, more like you have a list of things you're in charge of and handle them based on urgency. You're in your group, what should you be doing most of the time? Priority 1 is keeping you and your group alive. If the group takes damage, but they are above 90% health, you can often let the regeneration boon just top them off. Never underestimate regeneration. In many fights, it will be over 50% of your healing output. If the group goes below that, use your healing abilities to keep them safe as needed. Priority 2 is crowd control when it is mandatory. An example of what I'm talking about here is the Soulless Horror fight. She occasionally will have a break bar you need to crowd control. If you fail to interrupt this bar, you die. In moments like that, it is a topmost priority for everyone to take care of this. Priority 3 is boons. When there isn't an urgent break bar and the party's health points are not getting chunked, keep those buffs up. Regeneration and protection are massive for keeping the party alive. Might, fury, and quickness can double or even triple your group's DPS. Alacrity is huge for all roles. Vigor and swiftness are more niche, but if it is within your power, you want those to stay up as well. Priority 4 is break bars that are less urgent. This would encompass most of the break bars in the game, where successfully interrupting it gives the group a DPS boost, but it doesn't wipe the party if you fail. However, do know that often interrupting these stuns the boss, which reduces the damage your group is taking, so it is nearly always worth trying to handle these for both offensive and defensive reasons if it is time to do so. Note the words "if it is time to do so," they are very important in that sentence. Priority 5 is to do damage. This is the last priority, but it is a priority, both for offensive and defensive supports. Yes, you will do less damage than a full DPS, but any damage you can do will shorten the fight, thus making less time for people to make a mistake, which could wipe the party. So if those health bars are looking crisp and those boons are glistening, throw in whatever damage you can. Priorities which can depend on the situation. Conditions. The defensive support is primarily responsible for cleansing conditions on the party. For the most part, you will simply cleanse any you see pop up as long as nothing urgent is happening. There are some fights where you will want an understanding of, I need to be prepared to cleanse this immediately or people will die. An example would be Slothosaur when he does his shake. After doing this, he fires multiple projectiles that can apply 20 conditions each. In this situation, anyone who fails to dodge it needs cleansing right away, or they will have a very high chance of going down state. Knowledge of the encounters is extremely helpful, knowing when cleansing conditions is helpful versus essential. An honorary mention here is the poison condition, which reduces healing received. If a teammate has poison on them and you have the time to do so, try to cleanse it before you heal them. Again, if you have time to do so. When should you revive? For the most part, experienced players will tell you that it is not the healer's job to revive. This can be confusing for players from other MMOs. The reason is this: standard reviving involves channeling with the downstate player. This means you cannot do anything else that is non-instant during that time. So if the healer stops healing the raid to revive Billy, more people will go down because the heals stopped coming. An exception to this rule is Heal Scourge. Nearly all of their support type skills are instant casts, so they can still pump those skills out while reviving a teammate. But in general, you want a DPS to revive someone who is down while the healer keeps everyone up so that more people do not go down. It is important to point out that I'm only talking about reviving in the classic sense, where you run up to someone and you press the interact key. If the healer has a skill to revive someone instantly, such as Scrapper Function Gyro, Guardian Signet of Mercy, or Druid Glyph of the Stars, that's usually one click to get someone or some people up. It is totally fine for the healer to fire off that ability to save someone, then resume healing. But at the same time, do not waste that powerful skill if the person was about to be revived by someone else. Stability and Aegis. Some enemy boss attacks can be jumped over. Some can be negated with stability, which blocks crowd control, usually knockbacks, but not damage. Some can be stopped with Aegis, which blocks one single hit, thus has precise timing. Knowing which skills counter which enemy abilities will make healing so much easier for you. For example, in Harvest Temple, when Mordremoth does his shockwaves, yes, they do have a knockback component. You could try to stability, but that doesn't stop the damage portion, which hits really hard. Just jump over it, and then you take 0 damage. Another example is the final boss of the Nightmare Fractal Challenge mode. During his final phase, he rapidly tries to knock the group all over the place. Standard practice is to stability the party here, and the DPS can burn down his remaining hit points. This transitions well into the learn encounters topic. A little knowledge goes a long way and also prevents stress. I myself have get to the point guides for nearly every challenging fight in the game. If you don't like those, there are years of guides from other content creators, both written and in video form, for every boss. Take your pick. When you know how a mechanic works, you will know what tools you have to deal with that mechanic. If a teammate stands in a certain death mechanic, it is not your fault if they die. This is basically the nice version of the phrase, you can't heal stupid. When someone dies, there is many things that could have happened. They could have stood in something they weren't supposed to, and it was their fault. Or they could have gotten hit by unavoidable damage and didn't receive heals until they collapsed, which would have been the healer's fault. Don't feel bad if someone dies to something outside of your control, and if you see someone die to something you could have controlled, learn from it. Different ranges. Each support has different ranges for their skills. You don't have to learn them all, but make sure you know the range of the class you want to play. For example, at this time, many, but not all, but many boons pulsed out by druids are in a 240 range. but a herald is 600. This is the difference between those two. A firebrand makes heavy use of cone-shaped abilities, so they might take one step back to hit the entire party with their skills. Remember, just because you are keeping up your boons 100% of the time on yourself does not mean you are keeping them up on others if you aren't in range of them. Heal the one or heal the many. Sometimes you get a teammate who isn't in the stack. For some reason, most of your group is in one location, and Billy is somewhere else. Do you keep healing the many, or shift to try to heal the one? The answer? It depends. In most situations, keep healing the main group and maybe type something like, "Hey Billy, can you come to the group so we can give you buffs?" I usually phrase it like that so that it entices even the greediest of teammates over, like I just offered them candy. The exception to that behavior is if you are doing a fight and the low health person on their own is doing a crucial role and needs a spot of help. For example, on Doom, you will have people running around kiting ads or dealing with green circles. Or on Slothosaur, if one of the DPS is properly running a poison out of the group and collapses from it. In those instances, someone may be doing the crucial mechanic correctly, but be buckling from the damage, and a heal thrown their way can save the group. Barrier versus healing. Some healing classes can provide barrier, giving bonus temporary hit points to allies that absorb hits before their real health takes damage. In most situations, simply using the barrier skills when they are available will achieve success, pushing out those shields as often as possible. In some situations, you may want to save them to counter an incoming burst of damage. For example, on Veil Guardian, if your group is ignoring the green's mechanic and planning to heal through the punishment, a very reliable burst of damage will be coming each time a green spawns. To counter that, you may want to save your barrier skills and just use them all just before the incoming hit. This kind of goes hand in hand with learning fight mechanics. But in short, sometimes you want to save your barriers to counter certain boss abilities. The rest of the time, you can use them whenever they light up to keep the group comfy. Barrier spam and a constant regen buff can make a group feel very cozy. Next up, your utility skills and traits are not set in stone. There may be times when your group wipes and you can swap out a skill or a trait to make the fight easier. Over time, learn your skills, your weapon abilities, and your traits so you know what tools you have in your toolbox. As an example, as a ranger main, if I need a pull ability for some reason, I can use the Fanged Aboga pet or an offhand axe 4 to make it happen. If I need Aegis, I can use the White Tiger for a fight or Stone Spirit, all depending on the situation. Gearing. Healing supports generally care about two stats: healing power to make heals and barriers bigger, and concentration to make boons last longer. Many healers want 100% boon duration to double the length of their boons, but it is not required for all supports. The gear most popular with these two stats is Harriers, which has power, healing power, and concentration. However, if you feel too fragile and need more defensive stats, you might try Givers or Minstrels, which trades the power for toughness or toughness and vitality, respectively. This trade-off reduces your damage some, but drastically increases your survivability. And if a good healer is alive, the rest of the group is alive also. Just remember that in a raid setting, certain bosses use tanks, and many of them choose the tank based on who has the most toughness in the raid. If you do not want to be the tank, plan your gear accordingly. This is not an issue in any content outside of raids at this time. Online resources. I have met many people who copied a guide from sites like Snowcrows. To pause quickly and be clear, the people at Snowcrows are incredibly good at what they do and can churn out builds capable of ridiculous performance. However, not every player that copies one of those builds can play them at the same level. Yet they still refuse to deviate from the build at all and fuss at others for not using it also when they themselves are making mistakes. Using one skill or trait might be mathematically better, but require much more maintenance to use than another option. There may be alternatives with lower skill ceilings that are easier for you while you're mastering your role. Be open to experimenting with various tools you have to see what works for you and what doesn't. To give an example, on Druid, the skill Healing Spring is not the first choice for high-level healing, but it's fantastic for learning. It makes regeneration uptime trivial to maintain and cleanses the area around you constantly, making conditions a non-issue during its duration. Later, when a Druid has mastered keeping regeneration up and conditions in check without this tool, they could swap it to Glyph or Water Spirit for more healing output. Lastly, communication. I know, talking to people. Yuck. For real though, if you are struggling on a fight, a quick chat can go a long way. Maybe two people can swap roles, or someone can swap skills to bring more CC for the next attempt, etc. Don't be shy about talking with your group to find a solution for the problem at hand. If you can absorb these skills bit by bit until you've mastered them, you will be able to support groups through any PvE content in this game, and be someone that groups are eager to have as a member in their parties. I hope this helps some of you out. If anyone else has more tips or tricks related to GW2 support, please put them in the comment section down below. This video was not sponsored, so if you enjoyed it, please consider hitting that like button to help us out with the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe for more videos. Special thanks to patrons who make projects like this possible. If you'd like to become a supporter, there's a link to our Patreon in the description. Happy healing.